Welcome back to Needy and Normal. Thanks for pushing play today. I'm going to get very direct today as we talk about having needs versus being needy. And you may have already asked yourself these questions. Am I needy? Am I too much? Or maybe on the other side, you're thinking, oh, she's too much or he's too needy. What if those questions are circling around in your head? Listen, this is your episode. We're going to answer some questions and get to the root of what needy versus having needs is really about, and where do you fall? This is Needy and Normal. I'm your host, Ashley Levering, mom, wife, and life coach. After years of coaching and learning from my own life, one thing is clear: meeting your needs is essential for living your best life. Here, we'll talk about your needs and not only learn to accept them, but also tend to them without guilt. You're not needy. It's normal. Let's get into it. Let's start with the word needy. Just hearing it might already make you cringe a little, right? Ugh, she's so needy. He's always looking for validation. That's just too much. They're clingy. We hear this stuff all the time, over and over, right? And we start to internalize the message that needing things from other people is bad. It's weak. It's unattractive. It makes us hard to love. But here's the truth. Every human has needs. It's what we do here on this podcast. This is what we talk about. Our emotional, physical, relational, spiritual, we're wired that way to have needs in all of those areas. So to deny that we have those needs is to deny our very own nature. So the problem isn't having needs. It's when we don't know how to communicate them, or when our needs go unmet for so long that they come out sideways, often through what people label as neediness. That label alone, neediness, they're needy. We have attached to that description in such a negative way, and we weaponize it. We make use of it in such a non-compassionate way that we also take that away from ourselves to have needs. Because if we ourselves are saying, I'm being needy, we automatically give ourselves that negative label that also makes us feel guilty for having needs, and then in turn makes us feel the shame and turn away from those needs. And then what happens? Those needs become unmet because we've labeled them as this negative thing we shouldn't have. Think about that. If you take nothing away from today's podcast, please take this. Needy and neediness and that negative label is not serving you or anybody. I promise you that. Now, we'll get into this, but when someone crosses over into that area where we label them needy, it's because there's something deeply rooted that's not being tended to that desperately needs to be tended to. And that person, you or someone else, needs compassion, not judgment. And at the same time, if the person being labeled as needy, does nothing to figure out why they feel that way or why they've become that way, that's a problem. Therefore, if they're the needy person in a relationship and the person on the other side is, oh, you're too much, you're too needy. No, we don't need to be judgy, and we don't need to reserve compassion for someone who isn't showing those kinds of things. But I get it. You can understand why relationships end when the other person does nothing to explore why they're feeling needy. They do nothing to figure out how they can make it better for themselves, which actually, therefore, makes it better for the other person too. It's called being in a relationship. You know, how someone gets to that point is probably not of their own doing. It's probably not their fault. And unless somebody on the other side of it decides to take a closer look at it, there will be judgment. There will be a negative label. There will be no patience. And there will be fights, right? It's a pattern. This happens all the time. I'm sure if you've been the person who has felt needy, you can probably figure out, oh yeah, I know, it came from this, that, or the other. Maybe you have an idea of that. But you can see how this happens, in a couple or whatever kind of relationship where one person's needy and not getting what they need and the other person's not willing or able to give it to them, and then they break up, right? Think about it. So let's look at this for what it is. Having needs is saying, I feel more connected when we check in during the day. This is something I use. I'm feeling anxious and could really use some reassurance. When we spend quality time together, I feel loved. That's direct, that's healthy, that's human. Saying things like that is clearly, effectively communicating your needs. But here's what gets mucked up. Here's what we start using the word needy around. Texting 5 times in a row with no reply. Reading into the tone shifts. Getting upset when someone sets a boundary. Not because they did, but because it triggered some kind of fear, right? In other words, being needy isn't actually a personal trait. It's often just a coping mechanism that comes from unmet needs or emotional insecurity. So if you go past the point of I have needs, I'm asking for them, or I'm helping myself meet those needs on a regular basis. If you go past that point into my needs aren't being met, not on the regular, not when I need them to be met, I'm becoming needy, there's usually something deeper there, because these unmet needs cause emotional insecurity. It comes off as what we've labeled as needy. And when we don't feel safe asking for what we need, maybe because of past trauma or rejection, we end up trying to get those needs met indirectly, which can overwhelm others or backfire. And then we feel like we've done something wrong. Does this sound familiar? It's an icky pattern. So where does this all come from? Where does the fear of having needs come from? Well, maybe you grew up in a home where expressing needs was shut down. Stop crying. You're being dramatic. Don't be selfish. Get over it. It's not that big of a deal. Downplaying your feelings, right? You might have grown up in a home like that. Or maybe you were the caretaker. You learned only to suppress your needs because someone else's needs were always bigger, louder, or more urgent, or seemingly more important. So fast forward to adulthood, and suddenly even asking for comfort or connection feels like too much, right? So you either don't ask, or you ask in a way that feels like desperation. It feels needy. The irony is we all want to be seen, heard, valued. All of us want that. All of us actually need that as humans. But we're also afraid of being quote unquote too much, that we choose not enough instead. And that's a very lonely place to live. I've been there. If you heard my dog just sigh, maybe he's been there too. So how can you tell the difference between having needs and being needy? Well, here are a few signs to consider. When you're feeling like you're needing to connect with someone, maybe in this case it's a partner, are you trying to actually connect with them, or would you rather just control them? You might have to ask yourself that question. Maybe it really is just truly, I would like to connect with this person, but you think if I don't control the situation or control the narrative, I won't get what I need, which is that connection. But in fact, does the opposite, doesn't it? So let's think of frequency. How often are you needing reassurance? If you're needing it constantly for one person, that might be a sign of a deeper wound that needs your attention. And honestly, that's most often the case. If you're crossing over into neediness, as we label it, there's probably more to the story. So perhaps it's time to explore and give attention to the root, where it comes from. Maybe it's a safety thing. Do you feel safe expressing your needs, being vulnerable? Or do you feel ashamed to have those needs? And do they just live under the surface and become pressure and something that might actually stir up anger? And that hidden pressure can really cause problems, mostly for you. This is where a check-in with yourself is really helpful. Healthy relationships are built on mutual care. So If one person is always holding space, something's off. So I've talked about this with friendships in the friendship episode, where if one person always is the one listening and tending to the other person, but the person who's listening and tending to the person never receives that as well, it's one-sided, and it makes sense that the person who's never having their needs met or being heard or listened to starts to feel that over time, right? So that could be in any relationship, but especially partnership, especially friendship. These are just a collection of things for you to consider and think about in your own life and in your own relationships. And if any of these things I've mentioned come up for you, it's okay. There's something there, and it's allowed to be. And maybe you need to do a little more exploring and then take some steps, right? That's what growth is. When you express a need clearly and it's met with care, you don't feel needy, do you? You feel connected. And whether we want to admit it or not, we all want to feel connected. Maybe this is your chance to finally see your needs as needs and validate yourself for them instead of calling yourself needy. Instead of saying, I'm so needy, everyone thinks I'm needy, I'm too much. Instead of that, honor and validate the fact that your needs are just so and you're human, and stop calling yourself needy and call yourself human and allow for your needs to matter and allow for your needs to be important. And if anyone calls you needy out of pure judgment and lack of compassion, then your comeback and say, yeah, I'm needy, but there's nothing wrong with me for having needs. Maybe you're just not the person to help me meet those needs. Mic drop. So what can you do? Start by getting clear on what you actually need. Not what you're afraid of, not what you're assuming or judging of yourself, but the real need underneath it all. Practice expressing that without apology. This is where the no need to feel guilty for having needs comes in, that I'm a huge fan of. Try saying things like, I need some time together with you this week. It helps me feel close to you. Or I'm feeling disconnected. Can we talk? Being clear and direct doesn't have to feel like something harsh that you're doing. It can be loving, and it leaves for no need to translate. Like, what does this mean? I don't understand what you're asking for. It really gets right to the point. If you just say, here's the thing that would make me feel better, feel validated, feel comforted. You don't have to even say those words, but being as direct as you can is actually really loving. And remind yourself, you are allowed to have needs. You don't have to earn your right to be cared for. I think we get really hung up on taking care of ourselves and being independent, and that's important, but we're not meant to live on this planet and do everything alone anyways. We're not made that way as human beings. We're made to need each other, and we're made to be able to care for one another. This is why there are parents. We were born absolutely useless and incapable. We have to take care of each other. And just because you grow up and you're supposed to be responsible and independent doesn't mean you can't need other people and can't need help and can't reach for comfort and care from another person and have needs be met by someone else. I get really hung up on, well, if I have unmet needs, there must be something I'm not doing. Yes, there's always responsibility to be taken, but maybe the responsibility is asking for help, asking for a need to be met by somebody else. I could really use a hug. I could really use a conversation. I could really use some help with moving this furniture. I need you. I'd feel better if we connected. There's nothing wrong with that. So this word needy, I'm sure people have passed this podcast by just by looking at the word needy because it's termed as this icky label. And it's bullshit. I say needs are normal because they are. Having needs is normal. It is part of being a human being. It just means you have something to pay attention to, you have a wound to heal, and you need some love and support. So let me say this again. Remind yourself, you are allowed to have needs. You don't have to earn your right to be cared for. Thanks for spending some time with me on this one. If this episode is something that brought up a deeper reflection or relief or even resistance for you, that's okay. It means you're tuning into what matters. Your needs matter because you matter. And if you want to dig deeper, follow the podcast, leave a review, share this with somebody, get in touch with me. I am a life coach who tends to and helps people tend to their own needs because it serves a purpose. It's important. It's a priority that changes everything. It will change your life when you tend to your needs more. You're not too much. You're just human. So until next time, take care of you. Thank you for listening to the Needy and Normal podcast. If you liked what you heard today, please share this with a friend. And don't forget to rate and review the show before you go. The Needy and Normal podcast is brought to you by ABL Life Coaching. Visit ablifecoaching.com to learn about coaching with a transition life coach. Today, I am now accepting new clients for the fall season. And don't forget to follow Needy and Normal Pod and ABL Life Coaching on Instagram.